What the frick is up, guys? ¿Qué pasa, hombres? Ojalá que todo está bien. I hope that everything is good. Used that same intro about 4 times now, but it worked pretty damn well, so why not? Why change it if it ain't broke? Why fix it? Wanted to talk today about a little something called sugar. Not specifically just sugar, but overall carb type. Again, I am currently abroad, and when you are abroad, you tend to kind of divulge a bit from your super strict diet. I think in most people that is the case, and certainly the case for me right now. I'm going to speak up a bit because I'm next to the road, la calle, pero yo pienso es esto. What I think is this, okay? So when you are eating a lot of sugar, the reality is your body releases a little something called insulin. Insulin is a hormone which does this. It directs sugar, specifically glucose, right? That's the kind of sugar I'm referring to, because that's your body's preferred sugar type, right? It releases, you release insulin and it converts glucose. So not converts, really diverts, right? Moves glucose from your bloodstream into your cells, right? So insulin is anabolic, feeds cells, and it gets nutrients to those cells to grow and to create more. That's why we say insulin is an anabolic hormone. It's the exact same reason why bodybuilders take insulin to gain weight, to gain muscle specifically. It's also why can have other effects if you're diabetic, for example. If you're insulin resistant, which is type 2 diabetes, it means you've had too much sweets throughout your life, constantly spiking your blood in glucose, right? Because your food goes into your stomach, gets digested. Glucose goes through the enzyme gates in your stomach into your blood, through a bunch of blood vessels, and then your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin comes out, directs that, well, it senses the glucose, releases insulin. If you constantly have a lot of glucose because you're eating sweets all the time, you're going to be releasing too much insulin all the time. Your body's going to basically stop listening to that insulin because it's just there's so much all the time, and you're going to become insulin insensitive, and that is what type 2 diabetes is. Because then guess what? Insulin gets released, your glucose does not, in fact, go down, which is a problem. You have elevated hyperglycemia all the time, which can be very bad. And so that is the TLDR of type 2 diabetes, if you didn't know. You can't tell, I'm a medical major. But what I want to talk about in relation to that is that, when you're abroad eating a lot of sugar, no, it's not the end of the world, right? But one, think about insulin. Two, think about something a little bit different, which is that sucrose, table sugar, right, gets digested into two different molecules. It gets broken down into fructose and glucose. Glucose, like I just said, is what your body prefers as its energy source. Specifically, your muscles store glucose. Glycogen. Glucose gets converted into glycogen. Your muscles store that, gives them fuel, all that good stuff. Muscle glycogen, I'm sure you've heard of it, right? Fructose, on the other hand, is different. Fructose only gets partially absorbed, partially digested by the stomach if you eat too much of it. It instead goes to the liver. And what the liver will do is the liver will break it down, the majority of it, into short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids get converted into, as it sounds, fat, right? And so you actually end up storing fat if you eat a lot of fructose in your liver or, in other parts of the body. And so that's ideal. Definitely not a form of energy your muscles can utilize. Your muscles cannot store fructose, right? Only glucose. And so when you're eating table sugar, the problem, sucrose, which is what sweetens everything, right? Cane sugar, right? The problem is that only half of that is utilizable carbohydrates for your muscles. And so you ever thought like, oh, why do bodybuilders just eat like 10 donuts a day, same amount of carbs? That's the CECO mentality, calories in, calories out, but it is not the macros mentality that you should follow, because carb type and quality does matter, not only because of the ingredients in the food, all that stuff obviously, but in addition, on an actual physiological level, your body will not utilize the carbohydrates from 10 donuts, even if it is the same amount of carbs. Let's say you're getting 1,000 grams of carbs, a huge bolus, like, 20 donuts, probably more. Let's be realistic. Let's say you're getting, 200 grams of carbs from 10 donuts, like smallish donuts, right? 300, let's say 300. I'm getting 300 grams of carbs from 10 donuts, 10 like small donuts, whatever. I forget what that company is, Pillsbury, whatever. Let's say half that probably is fructose. You're not going to be utilizing that fructose that's in half of that for your muscles. So basically, that's half of that, carbohydrate content being empty calories for you in terms of, muscle glycogen. You're not going to utilize that. You can't even freaking store that. You might as well have just eaten, a steak or something with some actual nutrients in it. And so compare that to like 300 grams of carbs from potatoes or rice, which is, if you don't know, starch. Starch is pretty much all glucose, or it gets broken down into pretty much all glucose, storable muscle glycogen. Well, that's going to fuel you a lot more. You're basically getting twice as much bang for your buck, same amount of calories, but it's all actual utilizable glycogen, glucose rather, that can be converted into muscle glycogen. So that is the TLDR of why carb type matters. And also, from an insulin side of things, I think most people are aware of that, but you don't want to end up pre-diabetic because you're getting all your carbs from Krispy Kreme. I know, sorry if you're a Samsung aficionado fan, but do as he says, not as he does. He doesn't tell you to eat Krispy Kreme all the time, but he gets a bit from it. And a bit's not going to kill you. I mean, I'm one to talk. I had about 7 freaking Roman sweets, like I said, probably about 3,500 calories worth about a morning ago. I think that's a bit of an overestimate, but I always like to overestimate anyway. Overestimate. But sorry, I'm slurring my speech and shit, guys. I'm fasted right now. Fasted and 4 hours of sleep. I think past a week, like 30 hours. 30 hours in 7 days, not very good, right? Maybe 40. Pretty freaking bad. But anyway, that's the TLDR. So you can, I would say 80% of your carbohydrates from clean sources. Obviously, fructose also comes from fruit, right? That's why fruit sugar, I have a video on this. If you haven't watched it, you should. I think it's my first science breakdown video, longer format. Stone Science, go to that video playlist. Hopefully I'll get some more of those out soon, but they do take more time to produce. But watch that video because that explains very well why, for example, fruit sugar is not quite as utilizable for your muscles. Similar thing, however, way more healthy than, for example, sucrose, which is generally loaded with a bunch of processed shit. It's going to spike your insulin way more because there's less fiber and other things that are going to slow the digestion process, and then you'll be closer to being pre-diabetic and diabetic, and that is really what fucks you up more so than this muscle, glycogen storage stuff, which is more nuanced, right? No one wants to freaking lose a toe because you've been eating Krispy Kreme before your workouts for the past 10 years. All right, I'm at my freaking building for class, so I'm going to cut it short here. Thank you guys for checking in, and I'll catch you guys hopefully next video for a little lift.